is Wednesday, my dudes, and it is Wednesday, December 1st, which means we are officially in the most wonderful time of year, and to celebrate what is probably one of my favorite months of the year, we have a third episode of Hawkeye to talk about, and I, for one, am prepped with my Avengers Christmas sweater. But let's hop into the episode, shall we? Because there's a lot to talk about. So my favorite thing about this episode, which, spoiler alert, it might kind of be my favorite of the 3 Hawkeye episodes we have thus far, is the structuring of this episode. From the beginning with our introduction to Maya Lopez, I think that is brilliant because, as everyone knows, after Disney Plus Day, it has been announced that Echo will be getting her own series, and so we're going to be seeing a lot more of Maya Lopez to come, and therefore I think it's really important that we do get this backstory for her. I love that it's paired between her being very menacing at the end of episode 2, and then here we kind of see her, you know, go after them and know that she's truly on a mission to take out Clint and Kate. But I loved getting to meet her father, who's named William Lopez, and their touching moments, as well as kind of the subtle nods to how her dad was involved in the Tracksuit Mafia, because the Tracksuit Mafia could very easily be portrayed as these kind of like mindless, faceless cronies who are just kind of doing bigger bad guys' bidding, whereas we see between William Lopez and later Kazi that they do have their own personal reasons for doing these things and being involved in this mob, so to speak, and also like they have good aspects to them. It's like, just as Clint was Ronin and did bad things as Ronin but has a family, the people who are like bad guys, the Tracksuit Mafia, they also have that. And so I really like that this series is really trying to go into the nitty-gritty of like the good and bad of like what being a superhero is. And honestly, not to like continue on my love of Marvel train, but I feel like this is what Marvel specializes in, and I think we got away from it for a while. I can't really tell you why or how, or if it was just when we were doing massive team-up films like Infinity War and Endgame, it's harder to focus on this aspect of specific characters. But I feel like seeing that everyone is a little bit of good and a little bit of bad is so essential to being like a Marvel hero. And so I've absolutely loved getting to see not only Clint grapple with his past as Ronin and then want his public title of Avenger, but getting to see other players in this universe, such as William Lopez and Maya Lopez, kind of have to deal with those dichotomies that are within them, that duality of wanting to do good things but having to go through bad methods to do so. And also, I really loved, as emotional as it was, like this episode 12 minutes in had me crying. Maya's father, William, as he's dying, presses his hand to her face, and Maya in the comics has a white handprint in paint on her face, and so that was a really, really nice callback that I really appreciated. Additionally, I want to really commend this episode for the fight scenes and the chase. After rewatching episode 1, when Kate takes on the Tracksuit Mafia in the black market basement auction, I feel like there's a little bit of awkwardness that doesn't play as well or hold up as well on a second rewatch of it. Like at first you're awed by the fact that she can actually beat these guys up and has the skill to do so, but on the second rewatch, I didn't necessarily love the choreography as much. However, this warehouse fight, or KB Toys, which I thought was a really interesting Kate Bishop, interesting, very interesting. I really loved the fight scene that goes on there. I liked kind of the hide and seek nature of it, with Clint kind of running into the shelves and trying to escape Maya, but I also really, really loved the car chase scene. I really loved the camera movement throughout and within the car. The whole time I was thinking, how did they film this? Because it's not necessarily a shaky cam, but it definitely feels like it's being held by a person. Like, it doesn't feel natural that a machine would be able to hold the camera that unsteadily in the car. But then the way it swoops out, I'm like, I don't know that that could be another person. I can't wait to see the assembled behind the scenes like making of Hawkeye series or documentary that they do for each of the Marvel projects now, because I really want to know how that scene specifically was shot, because it was so good and I just loved it. I loved all the shots of Kate and Clint, and even once they got into the bridge, I really loved like the Pym arrow and the callback with the suction cup. I just felt like that was a very Die Hard-esque, where you're setting up certain elements within a fight sequence very early on and then calling back to them. And again, I love the fact that Clint always goes back for arrows. Obviously in this case he needed the suction cup arrow so that he knew they could make their escape and hang on to the train. That reminds me of the very first Avengers, where he's out of arrows and he has to go pull them out of the Chitauri. Like, it's just so, those little details that, like, now that we've seen him in action for so many years, sure, you could fill his quiver full of arrows all the time, but the fact that he runs out is just so good. I also really just want to talk and dive into the emotions of this episode, because I feel like that was really like the center of this episode, was communicating different people's emotions, and specifically Clint. I think it was brilliant to take away his hearing aid so early in the episode and have him have to deal with that for quite some time, because it obviously added a little bit of conflict to his conversations with Kate just by the fact he couldn't hear the things she was saying back to him, but also obviously with a phone call with Nate that was just so emotional and so touching, and like you feel for Clint, but you also feel for the family because he's not there, but like he wants to tell them, but they're kids. He can't explain why he's not there or even promise 100% that he's going to be home, because there's always that risk that he might not come out of the fight alive. But I also really, really liked the emotions of Maya versus Clint, in how Maya does not use a hearing aid or a cochlear implant to what we've been shown thus far, whereas she kind of attacks Clint for doing so and saying he relies too much on that. Now, obviously, it's a way for her to exploit a weakness of his. He's not accustomed to functioning without his hearing aid, and that obviously does take away some of his ability to fight or know what's going on at any given moment, because he can't hear as well. But I also really thought that was a great way to show that, like, when you're going to have a representation of someone with a disability or from a minority community, I always think it's great when you can show that there are nuances and differences within that specific subset of people, i.e. in the hearing impaired and deaf community, there are different ways that people choose to go about that disability and living with it, and I thought that was just a really great thing that this episode was able to touch on. Also, I really loved the way, and this goes back into the emotion, but kind of the mirroring of Clint and William Lopez, and how that other people are able to see the best in you that you cannot see in yourself. Obviously, for Clint, Kate can see all of the way he's an Avenger and an inspiration, and just, it's amazing that he's a superhero without superpowers, but to him, he knows every bad thing he's ever done. There's no amount of good deeds he can do to wipe clean his slate of sins, and he feels that with every moment, and I think that's something that Jeremy Renner does not get enough credit for portraying. Like, he's portrayed this character for a long time, but the emotional weight and like gravity of like being someone that has existed in this universe for so long and has been two different people in this universe, how much that weighs on him, and I think that's been portrayed really great throughout the series thus far, and specifically in this episode. And I really like that the parallel was his successor can see more good in him than he can even see in himself, much the same way Yelena in Black Widow could see things of Natasha and her goodness that she was unwilling to admit to herself. Obviously, dealing with Dreykov's daughter, she was extremely hard on herself and felt like that was the biggest sin that she's ever committed in her past, but Yelena could still love her and see her as her sister and look up to her in so many ways. And so I do really like that kind of parallel that we have going on in this phase 4 with our future Hawkeye and Black Widow. Last, I would be a fool to not talk about the uncle that comes to Maya's martial arts match and pinches her cheek. I don't think anyone can deny that that is Kingpin. That is 100%. The real question is, will it be the same actor? How will he be integrated into this story? And how much control does he really have under this operation? But I really, really loved that kind of little Easter egg that they threw in there. It was something that, like, if you had no clue about the paratextual conversations that are going on with this show about who might show up and who might be involved, you would just think like, oh, who's that mystery man? But for those with the eagle eye and already looking for any kind of like reference to him, I thought this was a beautiful way to like introduce him in the series. And honestly, I would not be at all upset if this is the only hint we see of him for the rest of the series, and that somehow this builds into something bigger, because I do think Marvel may run the risk with this series potentially of eliminating too many bad guys or using up too many recognizable named bad guys to then like not have anything left for the future, or have to really stretch to make one bad guy even bigger in the future. So like, I just really appreciated the little hint. If it's all we get, I was very satisfied with it. But what did you think of this third episode of Hawkeye? Did you like it? How would you rank the episodes thus far? I can't believe we're kind of already halfway through. It really won't feel that way until next week, but I'm loving this series so far. And of course, I am going to continue to do my watch parties. I may shift them to start at 2 a.m. in the morning, but 2 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. I start my live streams about then, and you can come and watch along with me, and kind of we can chat before the episode, give our predictions, and then kind of just react to things in real time together. So if you're going to be watching the episodes when they first drop on Disney Plus at like 3 in the morning, be sure to come join my watch parties. That is going to be all for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a absolutely wonderful rest of your evening, and I will see you all in my very next video. Bye, y'all.